Good evening, everyone. My name is Stella Mayer, and I'm the Director of Alumni Relations. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's event on behalf of the Kean University Alumni Association. This is our third program in the Kean Connect seminar series, which is aimed at providing professional development to our 91,000 alumni worldwide. In an effort to engage those of you who might not live in Union, we're also broadcasting live on Periscope and through Kean Live on YouTube. So we hope that other people will be able to tune in this evening, and we'll be fielding questions from them via Twitter. If you have questions, you can tweet at Kean Alumni, or if you're in the audience, you can just raise your hand once we get to the Q&A portion. Kean Connect is the brainchild of our Alumni Leadership Initiative Committee, whose co-chairs are here tonight. So I'd just like to acknowledge Tim Marshall and Susanna Tavera. And Susanna's gonna come on up and say a few words about the ALI committee. Susanna?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Stella. I am Susanna Tavera. I'm one of the co-chairs of ALI, and I, along with Tim Marshall, want to welcome you tonight. Thank you for all coming. ALI is a committee of the Alumni Association. We are generally a little bit younger and diverse professionals that want to network and put out opportunities such as tonight's seminars. We did the mentoring program. So we're very excited tonight to have our panelists here. If anybody's interested in joining ALI, you can see either Tim or I or Stella or John, and we'll give you more information about it. It's a great program. It's great to network or just come out and give back to Kean. So I'd like to turn it over to Lawana, who is one of our chairs of one of our committees, our Kean Connect committee. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So tonight we have a couple or four of experts about your personal brand, how to be your best marketing agent. So I'd like to introduce Tyron Hammy. He's the VP of Human Resources at Prudential.
Good morning, everyone. Good evening, everyone. That shows you how bad. By way of introduction, I graduated from Kean. I went to my undergrad here in management. My graduate degree, I graduated in 2011 in international business. I've spent the better part of 15 plus years working in various human resource functions. I started off in the staffing organization, worked my way more to a generalist type organization, have worked both internationally and domestically. And now, as you can see from the quick the headline there, I'm at Prudential working, supporting the CFO organization. So glad to be here. I think this is a great topic, and looking forward to having this conversation with you guys.
Hi, I'm Craig Jakowski. I'm a proud Kean graduate, 1992. I have a management science degree with an emphasis in marketing. I've been with Verizon now for 24 years. I graduated Kean in September of 92, and I started working for, August of 1992, and I started working for Verizon in the very next month of 1992, and I've been there ever since. I've done many things at Verizon with a marketing degree. I started out, believe it or not, in customer service. I had a headset on my head for the first year or two of my career. I started out small in this very small company when this thing called cell phones was new, and not too many people had them. And a lot of the younger folks are looking at me like, when was that? But there was a time back in 92 where it was a luxury to have a cell phone or a smartphone. There were no smartphones. And that's Thank you.
Thanks for dating us.
No, I know. Sorry about that.
Good evening, I'm Marina Townsend, 97 graduate. I see some DeFi sisters in the house. Thanks for coming out and supporting. I majored in history, kind of did a segue. I was going to be a teacher. Got my first job in New York City working for an advertising agency as an HR assistant, and my career grew from there. I've worked in retail, limited brands, Kate Spade, as well as Saks Fifth Avenue, and I'm with Viacom in numerous HR functions. I manage I'm talent acquisition partner for ad sales right now at Viacom, so I'm really happy to be here.
Name's Ed Tadich. I went here from 98 to 2003 and majored in management science. This is where I found out what human resources is actually through one of my courses here. did an internship through here, was involved in the University Activities Board, student government, class president, director of public relations for the student government here. So really enjoyed my time here. I lived here for 5 years, 5.5. And currently I'm the director of human resources for a global shipping firm, Japanese owned. And I've worked in a whole bunch of industries within human resources capacity. Started out as a recruiting coordinator, HR coordinator, and kind of just worked through and have progressed, fortunately. So here I am, glad to see you, glad to talk with you.
Thank you. So I'll start off with Tyron. Give the first question to you. What is a personal brand?
I mean, I think that's it's a great question. I'll answer it in a couple of parts and how I think about your own personal brand. But why don't I first start with just what I would view as the definition of a brand, period. And I would think of a brand as a promise. That's how companies view themselves. There's a promise that their product is going to deliver a certain level of consistency, quality that you can expect no matter where you go. So if you go, here in New Jersey and you get a cup of Starbucks coffee, you would expect the same consistent type of taste as you would if you were in California or you were in Michigan. Very similar, your own personal brand is a promise of what you're going to deliver to people, to companies, to organizations, to your academic world. What is it that you want to be known for? How do you want yourself to be viewed by people outside of just your own personal view of how you view yourself, but how do others view you? And there's a handout that I believe they were going to give out that Marina put together, which was really, really good, which talked about what is your brand, and it had a lot of different buckets there. I think the one that resonates with me the most is your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And if you think about that in career terms, many of the most important decisions in each of your careers will happen when you're not in the room, meaning decisions around your compensation, decisions around your promotability, decisions around stretch assignments that you may or may not get. Those decisions oftentimes happen when you're not in the room, and your brand is what will determine how you're viewed. And a lot of that will happen in terms of, do we think Tyron is right for this stretch assignment or this promotion, and why? So who's your ally in that room when you're not there? Who believes in your brand and in your brand promise that they're going to put their own self on the line to say this is an opportunity and a chance that I think you should give to this individual? So that was a long kind of once around a track, but I did want to drive that home just because I think it's an important component of how you view your own careers and how you take charge of it. Because how you're viewed by others will play an important part in many opportunities that you get there. And certainly if there's other people on the panel that think and have things to say about that, but that's my own personal kind of how I view it when I think about a personal brand.
Yes, we'd like to direct the next question to Marina. So we got a little bit about what it is and why. What is your opinion on that? Why build a personal brand?
I think it's important as you market yourself within, your career and wherever you want to end up being, if it's in healthcare, if it's in media, or it could be in technology. So it's really good to have a footprint of how you view yourself online, also within the industry itself, and also within the current company that you're at. So as you notice, the world is small. I think all four of us have some form of degree of I guess 6 degrees of separation here, that we all know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody of you. So even though I may have, I look at, Craig, like he's friends with my sorority sister who I haven't seen in 20 years, but she knows me from back days at Kean, so he already has an idea of who I am. So again, that's type of branding that people have to start, thinking about, like, who am I when I go into an interview? You have to be true to yourself, you have to be authentic, and also realize that, people are going to have a frame of reference of you, even though you may not know that. So somebody's like, oh, I know Jen, she's so-and-so, and I used to work with her, she's really great. Or I know her, ooh, don't call her. Don't want to have anything to do with her. So you kind of have to see how you present yourself within various markets and also within various mediums.
And by the way, my perception of Marina before I even met her is fantastic.
Stop.
But I think she brings up such an excellent point. With the advent of social media and other vehicles now, many assumptions are made about you before people actually meet you. I'm always surprised at how many people either come in for interviews or discuss, they just meet me for the first time. And they've already researched me on LinkedIn, they know my background, they know where I went to school. And then they may know people that know me, and they've asked those questions. I mean, Marina and I shared the fact that, she knows an individual who works with me at Prudential. So it's funny how, now there's this interconnectivity now that may not have existed prior to some of these social media platforms. And so now people can make assumptions about you before they ever meet you in person. That's part of your brand.
That's so true. And also realizing that what you put out online, it's really ink, it's not pencil. So anything that you tweeted, anything that you put on Facebook, anything that's out there, people are going to be able to find that out about you. So just have that in the back of your mind when you're writing something, that somebody's going to have the opportunity to look that up and see, I don't know if that's suitable for our culture, or I'm not sure if that's somebody that I want to extend an offer to. So again, these are extreme cases, but just keep that top of mind, and just, when you type anything, it's really ink, it's not pencil, and you can't hit delete.
Yeah, and just in a general sense, not even about, professional world, but also about that as well. I hire a lot of people, and what I'm looking for when I talk to somebody isn't always their qualifications. It's really important, but it's fit, and it's your presence, and can you get a point across? Can I feel you? Can I get a sense of what you're all about? Well, if you don't know your personal brand, if you don't know who you are, and do that little bit of, kind of looking within and figuring out what you're all about, then you're not going to be able to consistently kind of have a brand. And it's not hard to do, and we'll talk about that more, I'm sure. But having that presence and having that kind of mindful approach to yourself helps you kind of project what you want to project outwards.
Well, Ed, I'll let you continue on that. What are some of the common mistakes that people make?
Yeah, there's a hold on. Got a little cheat sheet here. People think that like a brand, they think like Nike, they think like the new hot stuff, right, or whatever. They want to be bold. They think you have to grab people's attention all the time. You might be an introvert, and you might be really, really smart, or really good at one thing and not as good as another thing. You want to highlight those attributes. You want to figure out what works for you. What's your niche in this world? What's your purpose? All that sort of stuff. You don't have to be bold. You don't have to be a celebrity. It's not all about that. You don't have to be flashy. You don't have to impress. You don't have to be marketing yourself all the time, trying to win every conversation with big vocab, flashy clothes or anything like that. Another misconception is don't overthink it. It's just you. Your brand is you. It's really that simple. You've been in your head your whole life. You know yourself. You just have to give pause, reflect for a minute, think about what's my brand all about, and you're pretty much good. And then it's just working on consistency and how you want to reflect that in your day-to-day, professionally and personally.
Well said.
Craig. Good. What would you say are the top three, what are the top three things that are most critical to successful branding?
Wow, three things for critical branding. There's probably a top 10. So
Okay.
thanks for only asking me for three. I think I'd start with perception. The word perception comes up a lot when you talk about personal branding. And your first thought is, you're thinking, what do people think of it? It's really not what you're thinking people's perception is what others perceive of you. So what are you projecting? And you guys had some great points, so the different ways that you could project your personal brand. It could be how you present yourself in meetings, how you present yourself in class. What are you posting on social media? What are those things you're working on? Those are the things. Those are things that allow others to perceive you in a certain way. So I'd say perception is one. I think number two is consistency. So your brand is only as good as how you keep it up. So are you being consistent with those things that you want others to think about you? Do you want them to know you as a kind, hardworking, somebody who's on time all the time? Is you somebody who shows up for meetings sometimes, but not others? Are you somebody who's positive on social media sometimes, but not others? So I think consistency is important, and I probably add, as a third, evolution. So an evolution of your personal brand. Every one of you have already, and every one of us has or will. evolve in our careers and our personal lives. Things will change, people will change all the time. So nothing stays the same for a very long period of time. And if you don't evolve your personal brand, you're probably going to get caught behind a little bit. So I would say, if you don't mind me, just limiting it to 3: consistency, perception, and evolution.
And I think with the perception, there's also versus reality.
Yeah.
So you kind of always have to check yourself a little bit and ask around to your colleagues and family members and your friends, be like, really, how do you perceive me? Do you think I'm funny, or do you think I'm caring? Do you think I'm sincere, or, what have you? So always check yourself to make sure that the perception and the reality kind of mend in the middle there, and you kind of get a good roundabout view of how people see you.
Do you find me annoying?
No, never.
It's a good question to ask, though.
But you're not.
Thank you.
So Tyron, who would you consider to be a good example of personal branding, and why?
Are you talking about people that are known nationally, or are you saying?
What would you prefer?
Why don't I just, I mean, I can take it in, why don't I just take it in general terms?
Okay.
I think the people that I've seen that have the best brand are individuals that get opportunities that may not necessarily have been afforded to them otherwise. So when I think of, my own personal career, many of my best opportunities, the reason why I'm at the company I'm at now, is through individuals that I've known, that I've worked with, and that had a view of me that was positive versus negative, that has helped me to get into many of the opportunities that I have. That means that my brand spoke more for me than actually individuals just actually working with me or knowing me. It was more that, this is someone I think you need to give a chance and give an opportunity, and we're willing to go to bat for me, which I think is very important. But just to kind of go a little bit off that question a little bit, because something that Greg said just stuck with me, which was the evolution. I like the other 2 points too, but the evolution one was really, really a good one, and just had me thinking while I was up here. He's right on the money about your brand needing to change and to adjust. Very early in my career, and for a good portion of my career, I was known as someone that got things done. And so if you needed to get it done, I absolutely got it done. The work would get done, and would get done with a certain level of quality, the consistency that you talked about, and that was good enough for where I was. It got me through a good portion of my career, and even through certain parts of the corporate ladder. But then, to get to those next ranks of the corporate ladder, I had to change my brand, in the sense that getting stuff done was good for where I was, but if I wanted to get to the next level, they were looking for other things. Is he strategic? Does he think outside the box? Can he sell a vision and lead people and lead teams of people? That wasn't part of my brand at that time, because they hadn't seen it. Didn't mean I could not do it. It just meant that that was something that hadn't been demonstrated. They hadn't seen it. Wasn't part of the brand that I had out in the organization. I had to find a way to create that. So I think his point was a very good one. You've got to make sure you're constantly adjusting that brand, particularly if you want to continue to grow in different directions within, and no matter whether you're going laterally or moving up. If you want to change roles and you want to try something that's a little different than your background, you've got to find ways to create a brand that lends itself to some of those opportunities. Sorry, I think I answered the first question, but part of it was a good point by Greg. That's good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Marina, what suggestions do you have to build your online presence?
Build an online presence. Obviously have your LinkedIn updated. Make sure that you have, your Facebook and, Twitter and Snapchat and all that updated, and in what kind of professional manner you want to keep it. Obviously people have a personal life, we all do. You just want to make sure that it doesn't kind of, encroach on your professional. I feel sometimes a lot of people kind of, starting to mend as one. So I would say that if you're a great writer, publish. I think it's great to get yourself out there and publish, some thought pieces. Another, as I said, on panels, as we are here today, is a great thing to kind of give back to the university and give back to other foundations or councils that you really feel passionate about, that really represent you. So I think anything being a part of, from online also to going into general, just being a part of a larger organization and having to keep up those types of relationships, I think all help in branding. Anything else I might have missed?
I'd actually jump on the publish point because it's a great one, and actually it's what led me here. My company, Verizon, I had done many discussions with high potential recruits within Verizon, and our Human Resources Department had asked me to do that many times. I'm a longtime employee, very passionate about my job, love my story about coming from college right directly into the workforce, and I deliver that message with a lot of passion. So recently, my corporate communications department asked me, hey, would you publish an article if you were 22, what you would tell yourself? What advice would you give yourself? So I took them up on that, and I did just that. It was very outside the box for me, publishing something personal on a LinkedIn site. But I did that. It opened up doors and possibilities that I just never thought of before, like being part of a panel like this, reconnecting with my alma mater, becoming a mentor as part of the Alumni Association, things that I just absolutely wasn't thinking about. I hadn't been back to Kean in about 20 plus years. So, just that simple getting out there, publishing, adding some, giving some advice to somebody who might be 22, like many of you are here, about to hit the workforce. So publishing is a great idea. If you are passionate about something or you have a lot of information on something, get it out there, share it, don't be shy. There's somebody who wants to know that information and will use it to their advantage. Great point.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Okay, so you guys, for any recent grads or current students in the room who will be out there in the workforce soon or are currently in the workforce and just looking for any sort of advice from this experience, thanks for coming, obviously. But through your coursework, through panels like this, through any lectures, you've gotten a lot of advice, a lot of common sense advice and beyond about how to manage your social media properties, right? You're on a PR campaign, 24/7, that anybody can access some of it, and that's all important. So I'll kind of like pass through that, but know that your social media presence is just a glimpse. It's just an extension of your brand. It's not your whole brand, right? So like LinkedIn is really important. We all talk about it from an HR perspective and operational perspective. As a job seeker, as a job hunter, as a recruiter, from our perspective as well. But there's like practically no expression that really happens on LinkedIn. Like your whole personality isn't necessarily going to shine through wholeheartedly on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's LinkedIn, right? It's your resume on a website and networking and some other components and other stuff like that. Tinder's Tinder, right? Like, keep them separate, okay? Know what you're doing on each one. Lock down your security settings, all that sort of stuff. I don't connect with any of my coworkers on social media except for LinkedIn, because LinkedIn's LinkedIn. But like Facebook, I've got my stories and all my stuff that I like, Don't want you to know about it, coworkers. We'll talk about what I choose to talk with you about.
That's a great point.
I'll give you the piece of me that I want you to have of me, and that's really important. Twitter's really hard to handle, right? Because it's either you have a private protected account, so you're tweeting to the closet space of your 20 followers, or you're public, like public. And people who make hiring decisions do look at social media. We don't ask you for your passwords. That was a weird phase like 10 years ago when they were doing that. But we look just to make sure we kind of know what we're getting, what you're putting out there, what your brand might be, what your brand extension online is.
I'm sorry, I have to, it's such an important point nowadays. So a lot of us wear many different hats, not only are we students or in business, but I'm a dad, and I've got 2 teenage sons, and I'm constantly talking to them, and yeah, I'm a stalker on their social media, and I'm watching what they're doing, and there's a common phenomenon nowadays, the retweeting or the sharing of others' posts, and the perception, well, that's not my post, that was somebody else's post, or that was somebody else's tweet, not my tweet. And sometimes they're maybe not appropriate or completely inconsistent with your personal brand. And it's incredibly important that you realize that just because you retweeted somebody else's maybe questionable content, that's a reflection of your personal brand, and it's critically important that you don't do those things. And that's the advice I give my children, and I don't see why that wouldn't apply in business or in school or anything else. If somebody sent something out that's funny or maybe thought-provoking, but it's not consistent with your thinking or something that you would say or post, don't do it. Chuckle, move on, but keep it off of your personal brand. That's a great point.
I have a cautionary tale about that. Everybody's familiar with Pokemon this past spring. I'm sure you guys have read in the paper about the Pokemon guy who broke up his girlfriend. I don't think you remember that. Like Pokemon, he was out somewhere and his girlfriend was following him, and then all of a sudden, she found out he was cheating on her. Long story short, he was on my team. It got picked up by the New York Post, got picked up, overseas. So even things like that you don't even realize, it could morph from something so small between your connections, and then it could get out into the media, and then you could be posted everywhere, and then it was like a huge thing for us that, he was posting everywhere, and he said like this wasn't, even true, and somehow he got picked up and then became truth. And then it really, hindered him to move forward, and he obviously, left our company and accepted a new position, and then that company turned him down. So those have consequences. So even though you may be thinking about, oh, this is like really funny and it's like so fun that you get like 10,000 hits on your Twitter account or Facebook, this really could manifest itself into something different where we could be laughing at it, but at the same time, this could really hurt your chances for a new job or a promotion and so forth. So just keep that top of mind.
Yeah, and also, if I could add to that, just Google yourself, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've heard that a million times, but just like see what somebody else can see just by looking up your name, right? And if there's something out there that's published about you by somebody privately, try to contact that person, the webmaster, the content poster, whoever it might be, and try to get that stuff off the internet. You might not be successful, but you can at least try, right? Because that's really important. I mean, people do look at your name, for sure.
And I think you also have to have, when you connect with people live, I think you also have to have a sense of, who you are. And I look at myself as, I'm representing Viacom, so I want everybody to have a great experience with me. So I think that kind of goes a long way to maybe you'll, turn on the TV and watch, MTV tonight, or you'll go on and watch VH1. I think it's an extension of your brand and who you represent. So you kind of always keep that top of mind as well. So whoever, calls me, picks up the phone and I'm like, I answer it. You want to be gracious on the phone. You want to be helpful. You want to connect with them because you do represent yourself as a brand and also the company that's paying you, that's providing you a livelihood. So I think that goes a long way. And I was in retail, when I had to turn down, candidates for a job, I still wanted them to feel good to come back into the store and shop because we all have to look at the bottom line, and you want everybody to have a good experience no matter what, if you're turning down a candidate or if you're turning down, a position, you want to be able to at least have them have a good sense of this brand when they walk away from, so they don't feel like, oh, I can't go there again, or I had a horrible experience, and they tell their friends, and that's kind of how it grows from a branding perspective, so.
Ed, how and when did you discover the importance of personal branding?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think personal branding is like it's like a buzz phrase, not to downplay the critical importance of personal branding and being in touch with who you are, what you're putting out there. I think there's different points in life where it just becomes evident that I gotta kind of figure out how I'm gonna conduct myself. Like one of those eye-opening experiences is when you're like really preparing for your first interviews and that sort of thing. It's like people can ask you, you can look up online common interview questions and stuff like that, but people will eventually ask you a question that's like right at the core of you that wasn't on that little list that you found online, and you gotta have an answer to it, and you gotta speak from the heart. That's what people wanna know about you. Who are you? What are you about? So I think an experience that kind of made me realize the importance of that is, especially as I've progressed in my career, is that interviews are different. Sometimes they're just over a cup of coffee. Sometimes it's just very informal or at a restaurant or something like that. But people really want to get the essence of you, and you gotta tap into that.
Okay. Craig, what one action, decision, or choice has had the biggest impact in the growth of your personal brand?
One, okay.
Yes.
One big decision or action.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure I've ever thought of that, but I would say, there's one part of my personal brand that I've been told by others and that I feel strongly about. Maybe it's the way I was raised, maybe it's just who I am. It's just loyalty. So, I'm married to my high school sweetheart. You heard that I'm with the same company for 24 years. I have the same friends that have been my best friends, many of them since kindergarten, and the rest of them who were from high school. So loyalty is a big part of my brand. I've carried that over in business, not just staying with the same company, but I spent a good amount of time over 24 years in each of my respective positions. Maybe in the earlier years, there was a lot more movement because you work your way up the proverbial ladder. But loyalty has always been a big part of my brand. I don't know that it was a conscious decision or if it was just subconsciously what I wanted my brand to represent. And that served me well because anybody I've ever worked for or with, they know that they have that in me. So, Tyron said something like, every job I ever had, people knew I'd get it done. Consistency was, I have that too, I believe, or at least I hope I do. Again, perception is what others are thinking of you, but loyalty is another. So I would say that's one conscious decision that I have and will continue to always keep as part of my personal brand. Great question, thank you.
You want to answer?
No, I didn't want
Oh.
to answer. But I did want to just touch on, in terms of perception, which is one of the things. I don't know if you haven't done this in your career yet, at some point you probably will go through what they call 360 feedback. It is the most terrifying thing that you ever want to go through. It's so interesting to see, and this is when, individuals, your peers, your managers, your clients, all are interviewed about you. And they'll spend a half hour, 45 minutes. Typically, an executive coach or someone else will do this. And they'll gather information, and they'll pull out, what do you think are Tyron's strengths? What do you think is his weaknesses? What could he do better at? What could he do differently? And then they'll package all that up. They'll keep it anonymous in nature, but they'll package all that up and give it to you. And to see how you are perceived versus how you view yourself is a very interesting process to go through. But that shows you what you may think your brand is, but then in reality, how people are actually receiving you. It's a dynamic process to go through.
And Tyron, I know from going through it myself, your first reaction to some of it is, that's not true.
That's absolutely right.
That can't be true, that's not who I am.
It
And-
will be defensive, yeah.
And then you wake up and you realize, again, it's what others are perceiving, and you better figure out why they're perceiving you that way and evolve.
That's right.
Figure out what that next step is to change that perception.
That's exactly right, and it's part of your overall growth. And so at some point, it's a tough process to go to, but at some point you'll understand the value of it because you realize that, okay, maybe I didn't think I was giving that off, but for whatever reason, that's part of my brand that's out there, and I want to adjust that, I want to change that. Or maybe you're happy with it. That's a personal decision, but it's a process through which you see how others are perceiving you.
Next question is for you.
I just took
I
one,
know,
so
I
I
know,
didn't-
but you keep going. What is the best way to open up a conversation with someone that I don't know, but I want to make, I guess, a connection or genuine connection?
I think that's sometimes, that's a skill set that you certainly have to develop. And there's a lot of ways to go through that. So you may find someone on some of these social media sites or something similar that you want to meet. And you're trying to figure out ways to connect with them electronically versus in person. If it's in your company, it may take a little bit more action on your part because now you're at either a networking function, you see this person in the elevator, you see this you know that you're in similar meetings with this person, or you know someone that knows this individual, and now you've got to take that step to start a conversation and to try and build something. I have people all the time that will invite me out. Tyron, I'm interested in your particular area. Can we just grab coffee? I've always taken those meetings, and the reason I do that is because when I've done that very early in my career, people always took those meetings for me. I feel like that's part of me just giving back. But it also shows a certain level of confidence, and it's not necessarily aggression, but it's a certain level of confidence that the individual has to reach out to those individuals and start to kind of develop relationships. I would encourage you, if there are people that you want to meet, people that you want to connect with, reach out to those individuals. I find people are usually receptive to that. And then it's a matter of understanding that, well, how do I drive this relationship? Because it shouldn't be inherent upon them to reach out to you necessarily. I think if you want to gain something out of that relationship, and I've always found people to be very, at least in my career, and maybe I've been lucky, but when I've reached out to people far more senior to me to say, I'd love to spend some time, I'd love to go grab coffee, love to hear more about what you do and tell you a little bit about myself, people have always been willing to spend that time. That's been an invaluable part of me just learning how to how to reach out to people, how to connect with individuals, how to drive a conversation. Networking functions are hard. You know, you see someone that's far more senior, how do you go up to that person to start the conversation? And then it's kind of that awkward moment of, well, what do we talk about? But you've got to develop that skill set. It's important in order to continue to progress in your career and overall just to broaden your network of individuals.
Yeah, and I'd say like, if I could add from a social media perspective too, every day, almost every day, I get LinkedIn like connection requests from people in Abu Dhabi, people I don't know, like people I don't know. And my network on LinkedIn is people I do know or people who I've made acquaintance at a networking event at least, something along those lines. So, you know, especially when you're in a position to hire people, people will reach out to you. It's a good thing. Makes the talent acquisition and recruiting effort a lot easier. But there's other ways to do it. You know, don't necessarily send a connection request. You can purchase like a premium account and send in-mails, or you can get creative, try to find out the phone number, do something like that. But that's creepy sounding, but much less creepy than just sending a, hey, let's be friends on LinkedIn, or let's be connections on LinkedIn. Because it's not really real. You're not representing anything about yourself. You're just saying, I want to be connected to you. And that doesn't do anything per se. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Is that?
Well, you know, following the evolution theme, so I remember in the early days of LinkedIn, I was very particular as to who I asked to connect with, but I was receiving, like you, many, many connection requests. And I don't know if it was just I felt obligated. You know, they're asking to connect with me for professional reasons, and I didn't think there's any harm in that, and I was accepting them, only to find that I wasn't able to vet them in any particular way. Is it somebody that I want my personal brand to be associated with? And I started finding I was getting cold calls, unwanted cold calls, or, you know, inbox messages that just didn't even fit my daily work life. And I've changed, I've evolved over time, and now I accept only those people I have met or have some sort of interaction with. Like, for example, the folks on this panel I connected with because I knew we'd be working together. So there was a connection that I could make, and I've evolved that. So I'm a lot more particular as to who I accept into my network. And by the way, that's both professionally and personally. Because how many people here, I'll bring this up because I think we all live this life. How many people here have a Facebook account? Everybody, right? Ever connect with somebody and then all of a sudden you start getting these suggested friends and you're like, where is that coming from? And then you find out, oh, they're friends with the other friend, and it's just very inconsistent with who you are and who you might connect with. And I'll purge that, you know, and I'll say, you know what, this isn't for me. It's not part of my personal profile. So another example of both LinkedIn and on your personal side.
Sure.
I think we've all probably had that experience, right? Okay, good.
There might be differing schools of thoughts on that too. I don't know if you guys view that differently or if you accept everything or.
Probably is.
Yeah. Are you guys about the
I
same?
mean, I generally will accept, on a professional, on Facebook, I don't do that. I agree with your
Yeah.
earlier point Ed, about, you know, coworkers. I just don't want to know, you know, some of your own personal views at times.
Yeah.
So I don't do that on the Facebook side. On LinkedIn, generally, if someone requests me, I accept it.
Yeah.
I think the point, though, is there isn't that authentic connection that you have with the individual. It's someone, you know, from China, someone from Abu Dhabi, someone from the Middle East, someone from Michigan. I don't have any connection outside of this kind of electronic connection that we have together. And it's not a strong connection, but it is a LinkedIn connection that we have.
Yeah.
I still want to piggyback on what you mentioned about getting those connections with senior level folks. That takes time too.
Yeah.
So give yourself some time, and when you're about to graduate, you don't have to make a beeline to the CEO. You know, like, get to know your team first, get to know, directors and VPs in your department first, and at time you get more comfortable that you can have a grown-up conversation with somebody who's been in the industry 15, 20 years, and have those types of conversations.
That's absolutely right. I think we started telling, I always hear people to say, what's your elevator pitch? So what is your elevator? You're in the elevator with the CEO. What's your elevator pitch? What are you going to talk about? I've been in the elevator with the CEO. I don't have the elevator pitch for, that's something that I think, to Marita's point, it takes time to develop that and craft that out. And you have to continue to work on that. Start lower, but you do have to learn to network and to introduce yourself to people that you may not know in order to broaden your network with people and to broaden your brand's appeal to different individuals.
It's very intimidating. It doesn't matter how long you've been in business or with a company to just introduce yourself or walk right up to a senior executive or any executive for that matter. Doesn't matter how long you've been there, but I'll tell you what I've learned. At Verizon, our executives are some of the greatest, nicest people I've ever met. And what you'll find is they're just like us. They're parents, they went to similar schools as you, maybe you have a similar alma mater. They're coaches, they like the Yankees, they like the Giants, and those are just entryways into a real positive conversation that could evolve into a strong business and then the elevator pitch. So be human, be kind, just be yourself. Don't think that person doesn't have the same thoughts and ideas as you do. And the one thing you absolutely have in common is making sure that your business is the best it could be. There's no doubt about that. You have that connection. So maybe you start there. Hey, I'm doing some great work. You should know about it. Or department's doing some great work. Love to tell you about it. Believe me, their ears will perk up and they'll want to hear what you're saying.
And they're humans too. You could just say, did you have a nice weekend? Acknowledge them in
Yeah.
the elevator. We all know who they are. Say hello, did you have a nice weekend? Something easy and simple. It's not an elevator pitch to, hey, you got to look at my work, or I want a promotion. It's more like just getting to know the person.
Right.
Yeah.
Marina, is there an easier way to get an unflattering image or comment off of the social media without, I guess, legal representation?
I don't know, that's a tough one. Ed, do you want to take that one on? You're a social media guru tonight.
So, I don't know, I'll talk about a different social network, because I talked about, Tinder and LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, so.
Tinder's not really social media, it's a dating
I mean,
site.
it's pretty social. That's a
He
socialization.
loves that Tinder.
Anyway,
I have no frame of reference. I'm sorry.
that's good. That's good. Nor do I. But anyway, we use Glassdoor.com. It's that, kind of company profile site. It's also a job board, but people don't necessarily view it as that. But people can go out there, people who interviewed with your company, people who are employees of your company, or people who just want to write something about your company as a customer or anything. There's no vetting there either, right? But they go and kind of sound off. And the whole concept of Glassdoor.com is full transparency, Glassdoor. So you literally can't delete anything. There's no way to delete anything off Glassdoor. The best you can do as a company with a paid account that you pay thousands of dollars for is to write one reply. You get one shot at it, and the person who wrote the review doesn't get a shot back. So you can kind of take a tactful approach to that and do that. That's more representing your company as opposed to your personal brands. I don't know the answer to your question about legal ramifications and how you could, delete that sort of thing. I
You
mean,
probably just want to stay low, and, if you've had a goof up and, everybody's going to have one in their lifetime, just, toss it up too. It was a mistake, you learn from it, and you move on, and you just build upon the consistency and just kind of look at those attributes that you have about yourself and just, stay focused on that. And then, everything blows over, let's be serious. I mean, everybody has a shelf life of 5 minutes on Twitter, if that. So just, acknowledge it and move on, and that's the best you could do about it. If somebody does bring it up during the interview, just say, look, it was a mistake, I shouldn't have said it, or it shouldn't have happened, or that was, a bad moment, and you learn from it, and you moved on, and everybody loves a redemption story. So just focus on that.
yeah, I mean, obviously Facebook has a lot of privacy settings, so you can lock that down where somebody can't just post on your wall, you have to approve it. Things like Instagram are kind of yes or no, right? You're private or you're open, so you got to figure out what's important to you, right? Are you really, really concerned about you being perceived as somebody who's pretty conservative, or do you really, really, really need the redemption, like the great feeling of somebody laughing at something that you expressed online or some way, or just appreciating your expressions online? There's a balance I think most people strike, and you got to kind of find that.
Okay, we're wrapping up a little bit. Ed, what media or procedure is best to use to get the most efficient exposure for yourself and your brand?
What media to get the most efficient exposure for your media and your brand?
It's a tough one.
What's that?
It's a tough one.
Yeah, I thought you said it's a cell phone. I
No.
was like, that's good.
No.
It's a good medium to use. What medium to get your brand out there? I mean, I think, we tend to think in the technology sense in that social, the technology world or whatever, but you're your brand 24/7, right? So I want to not repeat what I said earlier, but it's kind of just portraying yourself consistently in a way that makes you satisfied all the time. And that's the most, you're going to bump into hundreds or thousands of people in a day, and it's what you do in those interactions. I mean, I think that's the most direct. There's not even a line of typing or anything like that in between it. So that's what I'd say.
I just don't think you can limit it to any one. It's really a combination of all. It's your personal brand is represented both professionally and personally on every one, whether you have LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, et cetera. For me, Twitter and LinkedIn are my professional self. That's how I present myself on social media professionally. And personally, I have Facebook, which is probably my primary. There is my primary source of, personal exposure to my friends and family. I have an Instagram, don't use it. I have Snapchat for no other reason, because my son has it. Don't use it, just keep an eye on it. And, so I don't think there is any one, it's all of the above.
I do like the point about bifurcating, what's your personal accounts versus what's your professional.
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking to individuals, particularly at certain points, it is not always beneficial to have Facebook as a professional tool for yourself. During political seasons, there are such heightened sensitivities to political views. Typically, you want to kind of try and separate that from your professional life. We always try and say, look, don't talk politics at work. It never ends well unless the people absolutely agree with everything and position that you have. But when you have that on Facebook, and you can kind of now have people spewing their own particular views, which may be inconsistent with yours, doesn't mean that your views are right and yours are wrong. They're just inconsistent. It causes such strife in the workplace. And so keeping those things separate, I think is good advice, even beyond just your own brain. Just on a personal level, I would keep those things separate.
Agreed.
We're running short on time. 5 minutes, okay. So one of the other questions is for Tyron, what is a good way to remain memorable to someone in case they have an opportunity?
I would keep in touch. I would keep in touch with individuals. I mean, sometimes, I still have interactions with people I've worked with. At previous jobs, I've worked at a couple of different places. We stay in contact. I think, you can certainly be out of sight, out of mind if you don't find a way to stay in contact with people. Quite frankly, if people have a good perception of you and perception of what your brand is, they will remember that. But there are ways in which you can at least just connect, even if it's just a quick email out or just something to connect with individuals to keep them in top of mind. You may not always get to see people. I mean, people are in different areas. A lot of people I know still work in New York City. I used to work there at one time. I'm not there frequently. So it's hard to connect. But you can still find ways electronically to connect with individuals, even if you're not in the same geographical area, just to make sure they're aware. And then there's all these social platforms that allow us to do that too, like LinkedIn and other things. And I don't know if other people have different opinions on how to stay connected to people, but you never know when things can come back around to really benefit you. I worked fresh out of college at a company named Lucent Technologies years ago, which used to be a part of AT&T, and it was one of the companies that we just, we thought we were great. We would stay at Lucent forever, and it was going to be this great company. That happened, it just it took a downturn. But when I came to Prudential, it was because of someone that I knew at Prudential, at Lucent, that I worked with 12 years prior. I hadn't spoken to that individual since then, but we knew each other, and he had a perception of what my brand was and was willing to go to bat for me, to come to Prudential. So it's not always necessary that you have to speak to individuals all the time, but to the extent that you can keep connected to individuals, it can be beneficial for you.
And I would make the effort to, if an old colleague is in the city and they're in there for a conference, I'll make the effort to meet them for coffee.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just because you'd never know where that connection's gonna lead you to your next opportunity or recommendation. So always keep those relationships going, even though you may not have seen the person for a few years. It's just A, it's good to reconnect, and B, it's a good bit of your personal brand getting out there saying that you definitely will make the time to do that. Piggybacking on what you just said, how I got got an opportunity at Viacom was because I worked with somebody at Limited 10 years ago. And I had reached out to him saying, look, I'm ready to make a move out of Saks. And he's like, oh my God, we're hiring.
Yeah.
So even that little, connection of 5 minutes led me here. And, so you have to always take the call, meet for lunch, meet for coffee, always keep yourself out there because you never know when your next opportunity is going to happen. I know that we've all have been hiring managers in the past and everybody's just like, who's a referral? Who do you know in your network? Who can we get for this job versus going through 10,000 applications? So just keep that top of mind, as you go through your career and also on the personal side. I've had some friends I've met with 15 years ago through work and they're my closest friends now.
Yeah.
So I think it all, it's 360.
And I would just add, I leverage my professional social media to my own advantage. So for example, if I know I'm going to be in a business interaction with somebody from Prudential or somebody from Viacom, I'll search by those company names on my connections on LinkedIn, and I'm armed with that information. So, hey, it's great to meet you. I know some others that I've worked with in the past from Viacom or from Prudential, and you have that connection. And you can use that to bridge a conversation. Or Twitter, I don't use a lot of, but I share some things that I find interesting. But where I use Twitter is when I'm at events. I travel often and I'll be at an event and I'll have a Twitter handle and I'll say, hey, I'm at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And be shocked how many people reach out to you. Hey, I'm in town too, let's connect. So, those are the ways that I'll use my professional social media sites. So stay active, stay involved, contribute to those things. You'd be surprised how many connections you'll make above and beyond just that initial connection, which, by the way, is almost oftentimes on LinkedIn. You make one impression and one connection and you never really interact with that person again unless you work it. So just something to consider there.
Thank you. So now we're going to open it up to the audience for questions and answers. We have a question.
We have a number of people that are joining us online, so thank you to everyone who's watching at home. And we'll give you the first question from the internet. Shabazz Hyder, class of 2015, is looking to move from life insurance sales into human resources. What advice would you have to give him on how to make that career change and network properly?
Well, I got the guy from Prudential to my right and the HR executive to my left, so I'm going to defer to those guys if you don't mind. Start that one.
Sure. Just, I'd say join a professional organization such as Society for Human Resources Management, SHRM, as we call it. It's like as a student or recent grad, I think it's like $75 a year, and there's local chapter meetings. So there's like a Central Jersey one, and North Jersey one, South Jersey/Philly, and a Jersey Shore chapter. And there's probably some other ones in state and in surrounding states. And there's literally like 70 to 150 HR people there. You're in a banquet hall, kind of stuffy setting, right? But you're pitted right next to real HR people, just talking, sitting at a workshop, learning about HR things or whatever, putting yourself out there. Usually they do some form of introduction at the top of the meeting, so it's a great way to show initiative. Really the only people that are there are human resources professionals, people who work for benefits brokers that are trying to sell stuff, which there'll be like 2 people there. People who are about to graduate school and are looking for an internship or an opportunity for an entry-level career choice. And you, recent grad who's in that same kind of boat. So, you got a good voice there, you rep your brand there, bring your resume, make some contacts and get some business cards and stuff like that. Go to a couple of them. You'll be pleasantly surprised, I think.
I mean, there's also organizations that you can join, that have these meetings, just even beyond SHRM, that will allow you. I think SHRM is great because it's certainly steeped in HR discipline. The certification courses are good too, because in those instances you're going to be in a classroom setting with other individuals who are in HR. But there is, in New York, a National Association of African Americans in HR. Well, that's a great chance if you're an African American and happen to work in HR to go and bond in those areas. What I would suggest also is, I think he said he was in life insurance sales, is to think about, how I would think about it is, what are some of the transferable skills that I can take from my life insurance sales background and transition that into an HR career? What are some of the things I think are important that I could use to sell myself as being someone that can transition into HR? And realize that you may start, at a very junior level in very, specified areas. I think we all started one way or another in staffing or staffing associates and different things like that. It may be administrative in nature, but at least it gets you exposed to the HR discipline, and then you find ways to move around.
Hi, I was wondering, what do you do when, say, you're not feeling as strongly about your personal brand? Say, like, for example, Tyron, you mentioned that people know you as someone that gets things done. But what if, say, like, you're going through something that recently, like, you're not getting things done? And how do you, how do you regroup and, I guess, gain that confidence back? Because I feel like it's happened to me before. I'm like, I forget, like, what my assets are, I guess. But then I want to know, like, what you suggest to regroup and gain that confidence.
Yeah, confidence is a shaky thing. And if and when you lose it, it can be difficult to get back. But you've got to find a way to gain that confidence back and realize, here are the things that I think are my strengths, and I want to play to them. You can't forget that. And I know you said sometimes you might forget, what your strengths are and where you want to focus. What I find the most successful people, in my view, they know their weaknesses. They work on them, but they really do focus on their strengths and how to highlight those and how to position themselves to make sure that they're successful in those key areas and how they transition. So, I mean, we've all gone through periods in our career. I've gone through it myself where, you take a little chip in the armor a little bit, and I think, you're going to make mistakes, but don't let that become defining of you. I think we all make mistakes. The most important thing is that, one, you can learn from that mistake, but two, what's really been impressive for me when I've dealt with individuals is the ability to get back up after those mistakes. A lot of people can't. But if you want to be successful, you're going to have to be able to, one, get back up from your mistakes, and at times, just as I shared earlier, you're going to have to reinvent yourself, because as I said, the brand for me was Tyron's great at getting things done. He's great at some of the tactical things. Things will work out well. You're going to get a quality product. But as I wanted to move in my career, there were other things that individuals would look to say, is this someone that we think we can promote in our organization to be someone a little bit more strategic, high-level visionary, whatever the keywords you want to use at that point.
And also start small. Every little step you take will take you to a larger step. So even though your confidence could be low, just, if it's right now to get a job, make 5 phone calls today, or look at 5 different opportunities. Just start small and build on that, so your confidence will, start to increase with each step that you take. So, it's going to be a long road, but you got to start somewhere, and starting small and building on that gets you to where you need to be.
It was a great question, and I would add, comfort and complacency are your enemy. And it might be an odd statement. Why wouldn't I want to be comfortable? And why, if I'm doing a good job, I just stay that way. Why not? It's very easy, and maybe many of my panel members here would share the same idea. There have been times in my career I was really comfortable. Things are going well. Everybody seems happy. I'm just kind of sailing. Things are good. It's not rocked up. It's not actually a good thing. There's always got to be a higher gear. You got to reinvent yourself. You got to, things are going really well, but what else could I do to make myself stand out in my career if I want that next level job, or I want a different job, or I want to do something different and do something better? If you start feeling comfort and you start getting complacent, that is definitely your enemy, and you will eventually get to the point where that comfort will change to a place you don't want it to be. Like, you know what? There's a lot of people who are sailing. We need somebody who's going to take it to another level. I heard you say that. You had to reinvent yourself many times. You were doing a great job. Everybody was, you were Mr. Consistency.
Yeah. But
you wanted to go to that next level, so you had to, people said, well, can you lead people? And you had to show those
That's
things.
right.
So I've always said to people, comfort and complacency are not your friends. It's okay to have a bit of an edge and be a little bit uncomfortable. Lights a fire under you.
Yeah, for some people, it's a lot harder to get to that spot, that sweet spot of like knowing where you're at, liking yourself, right? And projecting that, being consistent, all that kind of stuff. We've all got our baggage, right? So you talk about inconsistency of your brand and like your comfort with that and performance. I think that's what I heard, at least at times, right? So it's not as easy for some people, and you have to, you know, acknowledge that. It's hard, it takes work. You have to change tendencies. Like, you know, if I know I've been bad at some of my jobs, like really bad at my jobs. As a waiter, I spilled honey mustard into a purse with a chicken finger. It was bad. I knew that wasn't the best thing for me. I tried 3 different restaurants, it wasn't working out. But, you know, you kind of gotta just work toward your, work on new tendencies and figure out, like, you know what, I gotta ask questions like I never used to in my jobs. I used to always just quit if I didn't like it or something like that, or forge a better relationship with my manager, so they're more apt to kind of take me under their wing and really give me that kind of edification that's going to help me make myself next level. Hey.
I have a question. How do you let people know there's many facets to your brand? My brand is that I'm energetic and fun. I feel like there's going to be a point, and I think there is a point where people meet me, it's like, oh, you're really nice, you're smart, you're energetic. But beyond that, I know I'm very energetic, hyper, and like calm. And I feel like something that's going to stop me because it gets me the creative stuff. When we go past that into a more business aspect, it kind of holds me back. So how do you let people know, like, this is who I am, but there's another facet to it, basically beyond what you see? Because it also helps me because I'm first going to talk to someone, first shake hand, I'm really kind of like we look by speaking to this, see that. But I feel like there's going to be a point where that doesn't always work, where actually they have to kind of sit down. So how do you show people there's many different facets to your brand?
Great question. So just to, if you didn't hear the question, for the folks on the web, how do you show people other facets of your personal brand other than what's obvious? And you and I have a lot in common. I also like to have fun, and I inject humor into a lot of things. Makes me comfortable, and I like to make others comfortable around me. But there's a switch. There's a time when you got to turn that off, and you got to get down to business and get serious. I would equate it to we all had parents who you knew how to act in certain situations. You acted differently at the kitchen table than you did in church or at grandma's house, or, you know, there was a way to act at certain places, and you had to turn things on and off. And I don't think that's any different in business. There is a certain way to act when you're presenting yourself publicly, when you're presenting yourself to an individual at work, or in any scenario, quite frankly. There's a time to engage people, make them feel comfortable, be yourself, be smart and engaging and fun and humorous. And then let's get down to business. And, you know, you could go back to humor when it's appropriate, but I do think you have to pick your spots there. There are certain facets, like to your point, certain facets of your brand that are always there, and they should always be there, but then there are certain parts of your brand where you turn on and off. I'd like to think of as tools in a toolbox. You know, what tools do you have in your brand that you can pick and choose when you need them?
And it's knowing your audience, so just being
Yeah.
mindful of who you're speaking with, and, you know, if they're a little bit more serious, you know, you could start off a little bit more friendly, but then kind of go into what's great about you. If it's about, you know, you're in a creative, are you in the creative industry, or?
I'm not going to business creator, but I just want to change some marketing.
So with marketing, it could easily be like, oh, you know, you could start off with a, you know, like a lighthearted introduction and then go into, I have 10,000 followers, or I could, you know, you could leverage your marketing in the sense that's going to get somebody's attention and be like, wow, there's a lot more substance than just, you know, this cool, funny, you know, great person standing in front of me. So you could just parlay that into something else that you've done, and that might be like, the person could be thinking about it and saying, wow, I need this person on my team, or I need to get in touch with this person because I need them for something. So you can always pepper that in with certain things that you've done from a marketing perspective, or, you know, something you've done creatively.
Yeah, I like to, like, when I first started my career, I was all about just trying to prove that I'm, like, credible. Because, you know, people see you and they go, okay, millennial, you're this, you're that, you're whatever, right? You're, you know, all these preconceived things, and they put all their labels that they're going to put on you. But you want to prove yourself that, you know, you're just like anybody else in the office, or better than, or whatever, at whatever you're going to choose to do. So I think part of what's gotten me further, I guess, is the fact that I learned as I've matured in my career to interject more personality, actually, and as I've gone along. So, like, when I first got my job, a very corporate company, ADP, payroll company, long-established Jersey company, I was working with a bunch of peers like my age, and I had the revelation, like, wow, I can talk about music with these guys and stuff. Like, I got the job, guys, I'm in, you know, and that sort of thing. Like, I used to DJ and all this sort of stuff, and I was still doing it at that time. And eventually I started to, like, trickle out information about myself like that. You know, you find a balance, because you can't just shut your brand out. You can't just be your work brand. You have to let essence of yourself out. You have to figure out what's too much essence. Like, you know, they don't need to know every single, you know, time you're dating somebody new or whatever necessarily, but you have to put something out there so people can feel you, you know, and there's that right kind of balance on that, so.
Hi, I'm Ajuba Gaylord, and recently we just had an alumni event on mentorship, but I would like the panel to speak to sponsorship and also ask if any of you had sponsors and how new in the game, I mean, how soon in your working your way up should you get sponsorship? Like, do you have to be at a certain level to start sponsorship? Could you start it right off? Because I was reading an article and that was pretty interesting.
That's a great question. Sponsorship is really key to moving up, to have upward mobility in any company. So it depends on where you are within your career. Where sponsorship starts with pairing yourself up with a senior executive and just asking them to be a mentor to you and learning from them. And some will be great mentors, others not. You kind of have to kind of see and work through that and see what's going to be the best connection for you to kind of grow your career. But I highly recommend having executive sponsorship wherever you end up in your career, because that really does open up a lot of doors. And going back to the beginning of our discussion is when you leave the door, you want the executive sponsor to say, yes, this person's ready for their next career, next bump, they're ready for their next opportunity or stretch assignment. So you just want to be able to have that. I'm just trying to think. My sponsorship, you know, occurred through partnering with this executive on a community project that she was really focused on, and that's how I ended up being, she ended up being my sponsor, and that helped me through my career. So you kind of have to leverage how to get into those sponsorships. That was my experience. I don't know if anybody's had any different experience.
I mean, I would say just also realize that it may take time, because you have to have some level of demonstrated performance in order for someone to sponsor you, because they are putting their brand on the line when they sponsor you. And so I think Marina's point is right. You know, in order for someone to go to bat for you, they have to believe, or at least have something that they can build off of to say, yeah, I'm going to go to bat for this person, as I talked about earlier, when they're not in the room. And so give it time, but try to make those connections. And try to get on as many projects as you can so people are exposed to your work. You know, sometimes people always, you know, get into, okay, I'm so, you know, backed up in this work, I don't want to take on anything extra or new. Sometimes you've got to stretch yourself a little bit. And sometimes it may be uncomfortable, but you need to get yourself exposed to additional people so that they can sponsor you in those rooms.
About 15 minutes left for Q&A, so if you're watching online, still tweet those questions in at Kean Alumni.
Hi, my name is Asa. I just have a question as far as recruiting. When you have a applicant who doesn't have a referral, what do you look for on a resume or applicant who's applied?
Well, I'll give you my perspective. So, you know, there's many different types of applicants. There's a seasoned professional who's had many different jobs, but just being in this environment, let's talk about the recent college grad. So, there's many opportunities for a college student to, lack of a better term, pad their resume, to put something on that resume that shows the commitment. So, yeah, GPA is one thing. It's important that you took your studies seriously and you had a high GPA. I would argue that even more important for me is somebody who has, you know what, senior year, spring break again in Daytona, or did I do an internship for a large company that's specific to my discipline that I want to get a job in? That is incredibly important to me. So, you know, something to consider if you're, you know, looking to be in the business world and get a job within the next year or so. If you haven't done so already, it's time now to make those hard decisions that, you know what, I've had a lot of fun up until this point, but now it's time to get serious about my career. I'm going to work for a company. I'm going to get experience. I'm going to learn the hard way or the good way, whatever way you want to look at it. And I'm going to have that on my resume. And then, I'll tell you, when you start getting questions in your interview, you're going to draw from relevant experience. You're going to say, you know what? In my internship for me, it was American Airlines, right across the street here, believe it or not. I worked for the sales office my senior year, right across the street here at Kean University. So when I got questions, when I went for the job at Verizon or legacy company of Verizon, I had relevant experience. I could speak to the business world. Yeah, I spent some time there. Let me tell you my experience with my boss or my coworkers or with my customers. So I would say absolutely leverage your time in college or anywhere by having relevant job experience, even more so than things like GPA or extracurricular activities. Not that they're not important, but job experience.
And also internships are they're extremely competitive. So if you can't get an internship, you could also work for, on campus, you could work in administrative offices, you can work, even working at the Gap or working at, even in the mall. It just shows that you have a tendency to show up on time. You're building your history, your career history. So as long as it's, within what you want to do, I think there's always opportunities. So don't put all your baskets in one saying, I have to get this internship. If it doesn't turn out, look for other opportunities to really increase your career portfolio.
Asa, just mechanically, like to answer your question too, like from a recruiter's perspective is we have, just like you apply online for anything now, there's no more, email me through Craigslist or fax it somewhere, any of that shiesty 90s and before stuff. But it all comes through a system, and there's like algorithms that we put in there that basically look at all the different fields, right? Because it takes a lot of the eyeballing resume work out. You've heard people tell you we don't look at your resume for more than a minute or two. It's not false. I mean, and it's because the technology does a lot of it for us. So it's about, consistency within a job application. I'm a little micro in that regard. Like I really look at those types of things if I'm hiring. But, okay, completed the bachelor's degree, but there's no date on it. Ah, okay. Or it says you went to Kean University, but it doesn't indicate whether you received your bachelor's degree or something like that. Those bits of information, but really, like, the system does a lot of the quantification, and it can assign a score to you based on, for that specific position, do they have a year of customer service experience? Remember, customer service can be retail, customer service can be food service, it can be anything. So customer service is a very, very good entry point for an early grad. That's how I got into HR. I started in an HR call center, which is probably more prevalent than it used to be as companies try to save and not have a generalist in every single office of the country. So that's really important. Just make sure you take time on the details. People will tell you a cover letter is important. I'm a little traditional like that. You can find a way to make it pretty much work for most jobs, right? And but change the company name in there and all that good stuff. But that's all basic. But yeah, I mean, it's really, really important to focus on the job application and represent your qualifications well.
And also beef up your skills. Make sure you know Excel inside and out, and PowerPoint and Word, and that you're comfortable with analytics. I think a lot of positions are looking for that. And I've interviewed a lot of recent grads who haven't, used Excel or don't understand pivot tables, don't understand what VLOOKUPs are. I think those are just some of the basic tools that you need in this modern day to really sell yourself and get noticed.
I just say, Ed, I'm glad you said you started your career in customer service. You heard me say the same. I could tell you, in 1992 when I was at Kean, and I was looking to graduate with a marketing degree, customer service was the furthest thing from my mind. I couldn't imagine that I'd have a headset on my head answering questions about drop calls and things like that. But it was a critically important part of my career. I learned the business, I learned the industry. I was able to understand and speak to what customers were thinking, how we responded, and just simply learn the business. So very, very big advice for anybody who's about to graduate. You may take a different path. It may not be exactly what your degree says you should be doing, and that's okay. You'll eventually get there. For me, eventually made it back to marketing and spent a lot of time there, still do. And I'm sure the same for Ed and others. So just really good advice came out of that thought that you were customer service. I was as well.
My questions are more specifically for Mariana and Ed first. Mariana, you were in retail, and I'm currently in retail trying to get out. So how do I market myself to get into more of a corporate or professional setting? And for Ed, as far as HR goes, how often should you reach out to jobs to kind of say, you know, I applied for this position, kind of, you know, just check up on it?
Well, yeah, I think it's a great question. And with retail, definitely connect with your DMM, or do you work within the store, or? Yes. Okay. So just really get to know your store manager, really be that number one person for them, and that's really how you kind of end up getting into a corporate position, is really proving yourself to your store manager. That store manager will say, you know, this person's amazing, you gotta look at it from a, you know, your DMM's gonna say that, and then eventually you can end up in a corporate position. You have to put the time in for that. If you're looking to get into merchandising or go into planning into more of a corporate position, you may have to look into, you know, what type of skill sets are they looking for. So I need to be more analytical. So it's great that you understand the store process, you understand store operations, but you also need to understand the analytical part of it. So kind of beef up your skills on that front too, understanding like Excel, VLOOKUPs, pivot tables. So it's really, you know, specific to where you are. But I think you should always have your resume updated at a moment's notice. Somebody could reach out to you and say, do you have an updated resume? No recruiter wants to hear, I'll give it to you in 5 days, because 5 days I'm going to find five other candidates. So make sure your resume is up to date. Make sure that you constantly reaching out to recruiters, you're applying for positions, and just make sure that, you know, it's where you want to be. I know that we talked a lot about, you know, starting your career off in one way, ending it somewhere else, but don't spend too much time doing something you don't love. So don't spend 5 years in customer service if your passion is to really get into marketing. So use that as an opportunity to leverage that into your next job. So maybe spend 2 years in customer service and be like, how can I move into marketing or go into event marketing? So you want to be able to leverage and keep moving forward. And again, complacency and being comfortable, sometimes you end up being in that job for 5 years, and you're like, how did I end up here? And you know, you lost some skill sets. So constantly be pushing yourself and making sure that you love what you do, and stay top of mind of that. I hope I answered your question.
Retail can be really tough, right? So if you want to get even from like a store level to a district level or to a regional level or whatever the model might be within the organization that you work in, you're probably thinking outside of retail as well, or are you're okay, so you're trying to kind of break out to it. Retail gives you a lot of skills that you don't even necessarily realize that you have. Like, you're dealing with difficult people, probably at times, a lot of times. And that's a skill that a lot of people don't really have honed down, and how to turn a negative interaction into a positive. So, you know, that is one of the most marketable qualities that you can have, not just in customer service positions, but just in like general business, is getting the service aspect. Like, virtually all companies now want to market themselves as a service organization. You know, we provide great service to our customers or to our clients. We provide each other world-class service. We interact with a service orientation. We get back to people and all that sort of stuff. So it's a really great selling point for yourself as far as marketing goes. You asked another question, though, about, you know, what's too often to follow up. I'll tell you, I had a hard time finding a job out of school. I had an internship in the city that, you know, I thought was going to really work for me. I think it did eventually, but it took a while. I mean, I graduated here in 13. No, I didn't, 2003. But I can pretend. So, you know, it was a tough job market then. Everybody thinks the job market is really tough when they're coming out of school. And they're right, it is, especially if you're, you know, just among like what sets me apart or whatever. But following up, applying like hell, you know, all that is good stuff. I mean, nobody's gonna knock you for reaching out too often. And it's kind of hard to get contact information for recruiters nowadays because we hide behind the applicant tracking system. But, you know, by all means, reach out, show that tenacity. You know, you get recognized for it.
And also be prepared. If you're going in for an interview, prepare, get to know the company you're at, do some research. Just really, you know, be prepared for any type of question, and, you know, don't leave it to single word answers. You know, like, we need to get to know you as a person. Are you going to be able to fit within the culture and within the team, and do you have the right skill set? And even if you have 3 of the 4 things, is that enough for you to move on to the next level? So always just keep yourself, you know, updated on, like practicing the questions. If somebody's gonna ask you a question, just practice your response. So you get comfortable with that. So it's not the first time you're hearing something and you're like, wow, I didn't do too well in that interview. Just practice always makes best. So always just keep top of mind of the questions that, recruiters are gonna ask you. Really do your homework, really understand the position, the job description you read over, get there early. And just, dress appropriately. I think those are some of the key things that, come into play.
I would agree with that. I think practicing for an interview is such a critical step. And how I would think about it if you're trying to move from retail into a corporate type role is, what skill sets have I developed in retail? How does that transfer into this position, as Marina said, after you've read through the position and the description, and find ways to practice your answers to that? I just interviewed a young lady that came from retail. She's doing an internship at our company. And I was asking her questions, and I was asking her about feedback. When did she get feedback that she really didn't enjoy, and how did she react to it? And she had an interesting answer. She said she's very much so an introverted person. And so the feedback that her sales manager was giving her was she's not greeting the customer, she's not doing enough sales, she's not really doing that frequently enough as part of their expectation. And she just went through the story of how she then transitioned and evolved herself, even though it wasn't in her comfort zone, to become more outgoing, to talk to customers, how she got into sales. And it told me a couple things about her. One, she was receptive to feedback. That's something that's transferable no matter where you go, because you're going to get feedback in your career. Two, she didn't let that down her. She was willing to come out of her comfort zone and do something that she wasn't terribly comfortable with, but she was willing to try it in order to get better. And so that told me a lot more about her as the person versus her HR skills and background, which was limited. So just think about ways in which you can take skill sets you've gathered in a retail environment and then transition those into things that you can use in a corporate environment.
My name's David Mutawi. I happened to go for an interview today, and one question that came up in the interview was what kind of weaknesses that I have as an individual. And it so happens that recruiters or interviewers love this kind of question. But in terms of branding, how would you answer such a question? Because, I've not gone to an interview and nobody doesn't ask that question.
I don't like that question.
It's such a overused,
Yeah, it's
overabused question.
It's really
If you didn't hear it,
Yeah.
it's how do you answer the question, what are your weaknesses? And believe me, we've all heard, I try too hard.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm an overachiever. My advice is, if you're asked the question, and I do think a lot fewer people nowadays ask that question, but if you are asked that question, you hopefully have asked that question of yourself long before you got in the room with somebody. You were prepared for it. I would say honesty. What are the things that you have to work on, you have to get better at? And more importantly, what are the things that you're doing already to do just that, get better at it? So I guess maybe it's a cheap answer, but I would say be honest, be prepared for it. You're going to get asked it. Don't give those stock answers because they're so obvious and disingenuous, and the person who's interviewing will know it and they'll feel it, which is probably what they might be going for. So try to weed out those who aren't honest and see what they might say. So be prepared for it.
Yeah, another approach to that is like all the conventional wisdom that you'll see online when you look up, common interview questions and how to answer them. They'll tell you exactly what he said, the opposite. Like, oh man, I worked too hard and all that sort of stuff. And really, you are looking for a little bit of how does that person react in that second when they get that question. It's not like a knee-jerk kind of thing, like people are taken back by the question anymore because it's so commonplace. But what will you say, and does it seem kind of candid, and do you show some realness when you're asked that question? But one thing that you can do is I have some positions on my team where not all HR people are analytical. Some people are really good at talking to people when they have an employee problem and figuring out, what's really going on, doing the investigation, making everybody feel really good at the end of it, or interpreting policies, all that sort of stuff. But I had an individual I interviewed not long ago say, my analytical skills aren't really up to the spec that you've got in this job description. That's a little too much. But then she told me what she's doing about it. she's taking courses in Microsoft Excel 13. And I was like, oh, well, that's pretty good. You're actually doing something about one of your deficiencies or opportunities to grow, and that's pretty good. You'd get more training here, by the way, you know, so I was able to kind of make that, acknowledge where she came to, and then say, hey, we do a lot of training here, and I was able to sell our position a little bit more, too, to her.
We're going to take one final question from the audience in case people have places to be this evening, but our panelists did agree to stick around for a little while. If you guys have further questions, they'll be here to approach them afterwards.
So my question is, if you are fortunate enough to get the contact information, or as you stated before, possibly even meeting a person of power in the elevator, what would you say is the best way to introduce yourself that would make a memorable impact with that person?
Well, okay, I'll start. I think a level of confidence. If it's a direct interaction, just that confidence level, which I don't know how you could measure that other than
There has to be a line of confidence, not
a line of confidence. Very good point.
Not
Very,
overconfident.
Very good point. If you're confident in yourself and in your abilities, and you're comfortable in your own skin, to just meet somebody and tell them who you are and what you do and why you may be appropriate for either a job or the next job. That for me is one of the more powerful things. Somebody who's comfortable in their own skin, who makes me comfortable around them. There's a lot of different interactions in any given day. There's those that make you feel comfortable when you don't even have to do anything, you just go with the flow. And then there's the other group of people where you feel an obligation to make them feel comfortable. So I definitely think I would start. There's many ways to answer that question, but I do think you should have a strong sense of comfort level and confidence in yourself and your abilities.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out this evening, and thank you to our panelists. We have some gifts that we're going to be giving you for participating this evening. And if you guys enjoyed this evening's seminar, as I mentioned earlier, this is the third in our Kean Connect series. Our first two were on financial health and well-being, and our second one was on the interviewing skills and techniques. So if you missed either of those, they're on the Kean Alumni YouTube channel, so you can tune in and watch those anytime. This video will be going up there as well, and we hope to continue to build a bank of resources for you guys to utilize. Thanks so much.